Hey there, welcome into the Brave in the Attempt podcast. I'm your host, Wyatt Spalding, and today I'm joined with Chairman of Special Olympics, Tim Shriver. Tim, how's it going?
I'm great, Wyatt. How are you? Thanks for
Uh,
including me in this. Thanks for giving me a chance to try to be brave in the attempt on a podcast.
yeah, no problem, man. I'm happy to have you on.
Thank
So,
you.
Tim, like everyone knows you big in Special Olympics, but maybe share with us how you grew up and kind of your hobbies you like to do outside of Special Olympics.
Yeah, well, I grew up in a big family. I'm the middle child of five. So I have two older siblings and two younger siblings. The two younger ones are brothers, and older one's a brother and a sister. My parents were, moved to Washington, D.C. when I was just a little, almost 2 years old, one and a half. So I remember growing up in suburban Washington. We grew up kind of on a farm, big, huge fields and forests and stuff like that. In those days, that was all kind of open space. Now it's all developed and houses and shops and stuff like that. But when I grew up, it was kind of almost rural. So a lot of Nebraska listeners would I empathize because I know there's a lot of open space in your state.
Mhm.
My mom was, of course, active in starting Special Olympics. So I grew up playing, what we now call unified sports from the time I was 4 years old, because my backyard, we had a summer camp for children with special gifts and abilities. And I went to camp because it was in my backyard. We had pony rides and swimming races and obstacle courses, and it like turned my backyard into a playground with lots of people to play with. And so that was a really important part of my development. And I played some sports. I played tennis. I became a huge baseball fan when I was young because I loved the Boston Red Sox. I was born in Boston. So in 1967, maybe some of your listeners are old enough to remember, the Red Sox had a magical year, and Carl Yastrzemski was our star, and I fell in love with baseball and started to follow it, and it was just even before I got on here looking at box scores from last night's round of games and still following the Red Sox. And that's a part of me a lot of people don't know. I left home and went to college and stayed in the town I went to college, New Haven, Connecticut, and was a teacher for a long time. Loved being in a high school, loved high school kids, loved trying to learn from them and listen to them and support them in their development and let them support me and trying to become a better version of me. And then the last 30 years or so has been all about Special Olympics. And then more recently, like one of the things I'm really curious about is, what could Special Olympics teach our country? We have a country that's divided. A lot of people in Special Olympics have come up living separated from people. They're familiar with what it's like to be excluded, to be divided from other folks. And yet they've built a movement that's all about inclusion. So I'm like thinking to myself, can't Special Olympics teach our country something about how to end or at least reduce contempt and hatred for each other?
Mhm.
Can't we take the spirit of our athletes and who come and are so welcoming of people, even people that might not have treated them well? Our athletes are really welcoming of them. Shouldn't our country learn how to do that with Republicans and Democrats, for instance, or around issues of race or religion or geography or sexual orientation, or all these things where we have so much hatred? It's one thing to have differences of opinion. It's another thing to have hatred. And so I'm trying to think now these days, what can Special Olympics teach the United States? That's a question I want to leave your listeners with, because I'm thinking about it a lot.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like being left out, like I was left out of sports. Some of it was for
Yeah.
safety reasons, though. Like my parents were like,
Yeah.
"We don't want you to get hurt." So then there's that because like you don't want to like get them injured, and
Right.
then but it's also like I just remember like starting Special Olympics, and like I'm a twin who was my coach and then a unified partner, and
Uh-huh.
so like luckily I had him to help me like convince people to come to our events. It's like,
Mm,
no, it's real sports. It's a real
yeah.
team. It's not
Yeah.
just your YMCA, let's have fun. I mean, don't you feel like yeah, you want to have fun, but it's still competitive. The athletes still want to win. And I feel like, we're still sometimes like everyone else is over here, and then Special Olympics is kind of over here. Like, even though we
Yeah.
do have a unified, there's still a lot of people that don't really know what Special Olympic is or think it's just like some like
Yeah,
charity
they think
event.
it's like some charity event once a year or something like that. They don't know that
Mm-hmm.
people are training year round. They're trying to get better. They're working hard on their leadership skills. They're working on teams and building, school climates and cultures that are inclusive. Special Olympics is a year-round grassroots community-based movement led by athletes with intellectual challenges, trying to teach the world how to be inclusive. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's what people don't see. And yes, it's competitive, but it's also, I think, don't you think? I mean, maybe I should ask you the question. Don't you think it's also like one of the most welcoming places in the world? Like coming to a Special Olympics event feels to me always like people are willing to take me as I am. And
Yeah.
I can't say there's a lot of other places in the world that actually have that same quality of joyful welcome.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, people don't say to me, "Hey, what did you do last week?" And have you been a good employer? Or what about your social media posts? Did you ever say anything that was negative? Or what are your values? And do you really care about I mean, the kinds of things that happen in our country that where we treat people and challenge people and like I said, so much contempt. At Special Olympics, I feel like I'm always treated with dignity and welcome, and that's what I miss in a lot of the rest of my life, honestly.
Yeah. Like I would tell my friends all the time, like, come out for basketball or something like, oh, I'm not good at basketball. It doesn't matter. Just come out and play.
Right,
Like,
right,
I mean, it's fun. Like you can't get good at something if you don't practice it. And we have practice once a week.
exactly.
So I mean, I feel like people think like they think of like the high school, like, you get cut. It's like no one's gonna get cut. Everyone's
Right.
welcome, everyone can play. Like I have my sports that
I
I'm real
know, but think about think about what you just said, that statement. No one's gonna get cut.
yeah.
Like that's genius. That's genius. Like this is the movement where no one gets cut. Think about that, people, when you hear this. Think about the message you just heard. What about like a family? Like a lot of families cut people.
Mhm.
What about like our faith organizations? They cut people.
Yeah.
What about our schools? They cut people all the time. It's like what about living in a world where no one gets cut? Like even if you don't agree, you don't cut people, you just try to listen more deeply. You treat them with dignity even when you oppose. I mean, no one gets cut. I mean, that's my new mantra for the week, maybe the month, maybe the year, maybe the rest of my life. It's beautiful.
Yeah, because like, I grew up like a lot of I was in my group of friends, I was the only one with a disability. And so like I'd play sports with them, but I didn't go out because I mean I probably was gonna get cut because I knew I wasn't like
Yeah.
most of my disability is physical. So like intellectually I could do fine in like social
Right.
aspects, but like physically, the one thing I love, sports, I struggle.
Yeah. Right.
And
Yeah.
it's like I'm gonna get cut. But then like when I did my first Special Olympic basketball event, I started like on like the second team.
Hello.
And then
Hello.
I was just like, at 13, you're like, wow,
I
I've never
love it.
started. I've never started. So, and it's like, I mean, even like some of
Love
the
it.
unified players, like there are sports where some athletes, they're just more skilled than unified players, but it doesn't matter. I always tell them, like, you're athletic, right? And they're like, yeah. It's like, you'll be fine. You'll get good. You can rebound. You can pass the ball. And I think, too, people think like I would like to see Special Olympics like unified as like a high school sport. Like go out for the high school team or
That's our mission. That's our mission.
yeah,
We're trying to put unified into every high school in America. And if
yeah,
people are listening right now and they think, well, what could I do to be helpful? Help us in any school, just one school. Help us, if they have a boys basketball team and a girls basketball team, let's add a Special Olympics unified sports basketball team. And if they
yeah,
have a boys volleyball team and a girls volleyball team, let's add a Special Olympics unified volleyball team. I think if every school in America and every school in the world
hmm
had a unified team, as part of its sports offering, I think we'd have. I think it would change the world. I think if every kid grew up learning to watch, cheer for, participate in unified sports, learned the oath. Say, do you know the oath by heart?
I think so. It's like let me win. If I cannot win, let me be brave in the attempt.
There you go. If that's like a value statement for the world.
Yeah.
Let me try to win, but if I cannot win, I want to be brave. Like just like this podcast, brave in the attempt. What if everybody grew up learning that? Learning how to be brave, learning how to treat everybody with dignity, learning how to create places where you don't cut people in your life. What a fabulous lesson. That's what I want to see in every school in Nebraska, but also all over the world.
Yeah, like I think about Nebraska and football is big here.
Yeah. Oh, really? You're kidding.
Yeah. Hopefully, we hadn't shown it in the last couple of years, but hopefully it gets big again. And I'm thinking like, many like high school kids want to play football but don't want to play tackle. Just go out for the unified flag football team.
It's fantastic, right? It's fantastic. No head injuries and all the fun.
Yeah.
And I know football is big. I mean, I've known some of the Rosiers in the past, great legendary figures. Guy in particular, great friend of the movement, known for many, many years. But football is a great sport, but it's also great in Special Olympics.
Yeah.
And flag football is fantastic. I mean, you see the crowds, I see the quality of the play, the talent of the athletes that are competing in our national games last year in Orlando and flag football. It was just fantastic. So, Special Olympics can modify, can bring in any sport and make it into an inclusive, unified, no-cut world. That's what we do. It doesn't mean you shouldn't play. If you want to compete in other things, great. You want to go to, a D3 or D1 college and get a scholarship, great. You want to watch, the World Series or the NBA Finals or the bowl championships, great. But none of those things are going to be any better than the Special Olympics competitions you're going to see in the quality of the athletes, the bravery of the competitors, the drama of the sports. No one outdoes us. No one outdoes our athletes. I don't care whether you're talking about the greatest athletes in the world. No one outdoes our athletes for bravery and competitive zeal and for a great sports experience.
Yeah. And I bet you've seen it from day one with your mom starting Special Olympics. And maybe could you talk more about that? Like you guys went from the
my mom was a vigorous competitor. I was about to say vicious, but I changed to vigorous. Vigorous competitor. My mom wanted to prove that people with intellectual challenges could be great. That's what she wanted to prove. She wanted to prove that they could win, that they could be excellent by any measure. And the movement has proven that. The movement has documented that over and over and over again. Our athletes show themselves to be great. They show themselves to be great in ways in which the world typically judges, like Chris Nikic and the Ironman stuff, and athletes running marathons in under 3 hours and stuff like that. And our movement's shown our athletes to be great when it comes to just bravery and courage and having the guts to get to the starting line and give the world everything they've got. And that's just as powerful a form of bravery, in my experience, as achieving some specific goal or some time or some championship. So, that's what she really wanted. She wanted people to see people with intellectual challenges and say, "Wow, I had no idea how great they could be." And that's what her hope was. And I think that's happening all over the world. 26 sports. I mean, remember, 100,000 games a year at the local level in the Special Olympics movement. Think about that, people. Not just in Nebraska, not just in the USA, but in Mexico and Peru and Brazil and Kenya and Egypt and Indonesia and China and Germany and Ireland and all these countries, all of them have local Special Olympics events going on right now today, this week, this month, whenever you're listening to this, you can say, well, how does he know if it's happening when I'm listening to the podcast? Well, because it happens every day all over the world. People training, people competing, people getting medals, people challenging themselves, people getting better year after year, people learning to lead, people advocating for change, people pushing for early childhood programs, people challenging schools to put unified sports in their schools every day all over the world. That's a pretty, I mean, I don't say this, it'll sound like I'm being selfish that I'm saying this is about my mom's legacy. It's not. It's about the legacy of all the competitors.
Mhm.
The dozens, hundreds, thousands of competitors in Special Olympics Nebraska over the decades who have proven to people in Nebraska, and their light shines beyond Nebraska. So people see this stuff and they think to themselves, wow, the world is changing for the better. We talk about how the world has changed for the worse all the time, but sometimes the world changes for the better. And I think Special Olympics is part of that.
Yeah, for sure. And now unified obviously is super big, and
Yeah.
I've seen like unified grow so much, and I started in traditional. And do you see like unified, like it's growing, but do you see traditional growing big as well, even though
It
unified is kind of
varies
the
a
more
lot from
popular?
people. What I think is people should have the choice.
Yeah.
If they want to compete in a traditional team of softball players, let's say everybody has an intellectual challenge, the level, the friendships, the sense of belonging that comes from that. If that's what folks want, we got it. People want to compete on the same sport, the same level in a unified program, we got it. If people are done with competing and they want to learn leadership skills, how do they take the skills they learned in sports and use them beyond sports? We got it. If people want to be advocates for taking the lessons from unified and bringing them to their school, leading campaigns to end the use of the R word, or inspiring people to make other kinds of cheerleading and art programs and other kinds of programs in their schools, lunch, make it more inclusive. We got that. We got programs to make the schools more inclusive. If people are saying, well, wait a minute, I want to really focus on the healthcare issues facing people with intellectual disabilities, we got that too, healthy athletes. So it's a movement that has roles and opportunities for everybody who cares about trying to teach the basic lesson that when you encounter difference, it's best to choose to include. It's best
Yeah.
to choose dignity over fear. It's best to choose welcome over exclusion. It's best to choose curiosity over furious. It's best to be an includer.
Yeah, for sure. And I tell people all the time, and athletes, coaches, whoever, like, yeah, like you can play traditional. Like I think a lot of my friends play unified. And it's like, no, we could play traditional and it's both fun. Like there's
Yeah,
nothing wrong with either. Like they're
that's
both
right.
great. I've had
That's
great
right.
memories with my brother in both areas. Like we always talk about when we started and I played traditional and then moved to unified, and just we go back and talk about the games and how fun they were. And
Yeah,
so
exactly.
I think like I just don't want people to be like favor one over the other. Like
Yeah,
you said, you have the choice and they're both great options.
yeah. I mean, the world doesn't neatly sort. A lot of people would say, well, we only want unified in our school, or we only want unified and because that's the wave of the future. And my
Mhm.
my view is, experiences are different for different people. I think that
Mhm.
we've learned from other movements. Sometimes it's fun to be with your own gang.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's fun to be with your own religion, your own ethnic group, your own culture, racial group. Sometimes people want to spend time, just hanging out with their own team,
Yeah.
which is great. There's nothing wrong with that as long as it's not based on hating somebody else. Our traditional program doesn't exclude people who don't have intellectual disabilities. It's just an organized way of getting people together in a traditional program to play sports together. And if people are like, wait a minute, that's not what I want. I want to be around. I want to be in a bigger mix. We got that too.
Yeah. Do you remember some of the first unified uh teams in Special Olympics?
Well, I mean, I remember I competed on one.
Nice.
But this was in the 90s, so I wouldn't
Yeah.
say it's one of the first. I mean, for me, the first unified experience was when I was 4 years old, and I had a camper who was my buddy at Camp Shriver, and we did a lot of things together. I don't remember a lot of it, but my mom wrote about it, so I know that happened for me. But I played on a unified team, unified softball team in Special Olympics Connecticut in the 90s, and we won a gold medal in states one year, a silver medal in states the next year. We competed. There were cops on our team and Special Olympics athletes who were working in different jobs, and we were like any rec softball league in any other town. Or we were from New Haven. We played against the teams from Waterbury and other cities, and we had a blast. It was very competitive. But I will say, to your point, there were a few members of the team who really didn't feel like their ability level or their experience fit on the team. And the following year, they went to a traditional program. And, maybe you could say, well, we didn't do a good enough job. But I think it was just like, it just wasn't a perfect fit for them. So they decided, for an alternative.
Yeah. And like, I mean, I've run into athletes where it's like, I kind of want to go to traditional because maybe I don't know, for some reason they just like that better. Or sometimes it can get like, at least the basketball games I played in, it can get pretty physical. So you got to be okay with like diving on the floor and getting knocked down. And some athletes love, like I love that, but most of that was because of the beatings I took in games from my siblings. And
I know that feeling. I know that feeling. Trust me.
isn't that the worst feeling though? Like losing in Special Olympics, like I'm really competitive and I'll get over it, but losing your siblings is the worst.
Oh, losing your siblings is the worst.
It's like going home.
I hope my brothers and my sister don't hear this, but losing to your siblings is the worst. Now I'm going to say, just in case they do hear it, I never lose to my sibling. I wish that were true. I wish that were true. I wish that were
I know. You just get destroyed. But I think, having siblings makes you tough. And I think like my disability, really, I should play maybe down a little because physically, trying to keep up. But I'm able to play at a high level because I took those beatings from my siblings. And then what was cool is when I joined Special Olympics, my brother taught me like the strategies of basketball and how to watch film. And like, if you are the point guard, if you go here, this will happen or this will happen. And so I think like that's what's cool is you have coaches now, like they legit, like they treat it like high school. Like they want you to learn the strategies of the game. It's not like
sure
you just go out there and like, oh, go play. It's like, football, we have plays. We got to remember the plays. And sometimes they work and sometimes they blow up, but you just make something happen on the fly and just like in a high school football game.
Exactly.
And I think too, like go back to like, just everyone is included, the fans, like they get really into it. And don't you agree? Like it's cool to see someone when they've never been to a Special Olympic event and they're like the most into it. Like they're so excited.
They're so excited because they've never seen anything like it.
Yeah.
And they're shocked. They're shocked by the joy. They're shocked by the skill. They're shocked by the competitiveness. They're shocked by, how people often end games with hugs for the opposing team. I mean, it's a unique form of sport. Our movement is so freaking inspiring to people. Yeah. I mean, I don't say that because I've talked to people. I say because it's so inspiring to me. I mean, I leave. I wish I had good words here, but I leave Special Olympics events every time, and I've been to 1,000, thinking I want to live in a world like that, and thinking I want to be a better person because of what I just saw those athletes show me. The grit, the skill, the joy, the no-cut mentality. That's the world I want to live in. It doesn't have to just be Special Olympics. It can be elsewhere. And it always reminds me to try to make more of my life like what I see from our athletes.
Yeah. Yeah. And then like, what was it like the first Special Olympic events did you get a lot of people to come watch, or were the
Well, if you
stands
look
kind of
at the
empty?
first games in 1968, people could Google them. You'll see it was at Chicago Soldier Field. You know how many people it sat? Almost 100,000 in those days. You know how many people were there? Like less than 500.
Mm.
Whole place was empty. And that sadly is still often the case. Not always, but it's still often the case that we don't get the kind of fans we should.
Mm-hmm.
But that's changing. ESPN has been terrific. And when they broadcast our events, they get good ratings. And same thing happened in Berlin. The German and the European broadcasters, they got great audience participation in watching and in cheering for our athletes. Like you mentioned high school sports. When we do Special Olympics unified sports in high schools, we get good crowds. I don't know about Nebraska, but we get good crowds for those big games, and we get good crowds when the cheerleaders come and the band plays and the principal, the assistant principal, or the teachers and the coaches are speaking, and the athletes, Special Olympics athletes, are giving little speeches, and we do the oath, and places go nuts. So we have a fan base. We just have to continue to build it.
Right. Like the University of Nebraska has a unified league for their intramurals. So I play in that. And at the high school, like there's quite a bit of people that show up for the events. But then at the college level, we're playing in the intramural league. So not a bunch of people watch. But
Right.
when we do, you always like, I can kind of tell, you can see the fans like they did not think we were this good. And
Yeah, they're
like,
surprised.
yeah. And
That's
so,
the nature of life. So let's surprise them, baby, over and over again. Let's shock them. Come on
yeah,
out. That's the message. That could be your message. Why? Come on out. We'll surprise you.
yeah. Like one of my favorite memories, I was a sophomore in high school. And it was the first time I got like all my friends to come to our game. And like there was this track and the YMCA it was a big YMCA, but we played full court the short way, so the seating was small. So they just stood up on the track and I hit this shot and people went crazy and then buckets were made. Everyone went pretty big and it was like the loudest I've ever heard a Special Olympic event. And I was just
Right.
like, man, I wanted to be like this all the time. Like, and growing up watching my brother play high school sports and sisters, uh, that's what we wanted. And it can be like that where the stands are just packed. And it's always, I mean, most of the Special Olympic events, they're come down to the wire and
That's right.
then just some like crazy shot happens, like where maybe you're like 0 for 5 and then you hit the sixth 3-pointer you shoot and you hit it at the buzzer. It's just like, see, we can hit shots.
Exactly.
We just wait till the
Exactly.
end to make it close. So
Exactly.
so
Well, I hope this podcast helps, right? I hope this podcast reminds people to come out and cheer. Fall season's coming up. If you're
mhm,
listening to this in the summer, but if you're listening to it in the fall, that means there's games at local high schools. There's games at University of Nebraska intramural. I don't know if you can find them all on the website, but maybe you can find them on the website, or maybe you can email the podcast and find schedules of events. I always say to people, we don't need you. If you don't know anything about Special Olympics, we don't need 2 hours of your time. We don't need 2 weeks of your time. We don't need 2 years of your time. We need about a half an hour. That's
mhm.
all. Come out and watch for half an hour. If you don't, if it doesn't stick, you don't have to stay. But
Yeah.
I almost every time we get people for half an hour, I'm sorry to say, because I don't want to warn people negatively, but we hook you for life. We'll hook you for life. Just give us a half hour. Come on out, cheer. You don't have to register. You don't need tickets most of the time. You don't need to have an ID or anything like that. You don't need any money. You don't need a fancy haircut. Just come out half an hour, watch our athletes. If you want to, shoot some baskets, but give us a half hour. We'll change your life.
Yeah, for sure. So, as chairman of Special Olympics, what's your everyday like for working in Special Olympics?
Well, it's like a lot of things. I'm a volunteer,
Mhm.
but I spent a lot of time. Like this morning, I was on calls with our chief executive about different issues around the world. And sometimes we'll be trying to figure out how to get a governor or a senator or a prime minister or from some country on site. So I'll write letters or arrange calls or Zoom calls, and sometimes I'll be talking to donors and trying to get them interested in supporting our inclusive movement and our healthcare work and education. A lot of people give money to health and education programs, but they don't know Special Olympics is the largest program in the world for inclusive education. They don't know that Special Olympics is the largest healthcare program in the world for people with intellectual disabilities. So I spent a lot of time talking to them and saying, hey, look, this is something where you could invest, where you could give and make a real difference, real impact. I mean, immediate impact. So I do that a lot. I try to get out to events locally and where I live in Maryland and DC and sometimes in Virginia to watch and cheer. You know, the whole range of things, but mostly I try to be close to the action and get to high schools. Like you just said, I love getting to high school unified sports events. That's one of my favorite things these days. I get to be in the stands. I watch the cheerleaders. I see the band. Sometimes the band is inclusive because of Special Olympics. Sometimes the cheerleaders are inclusive. A lot of times the stands are inclusive. I love to see that. I love to see young people growing up and claiming the mantle of the inclusive generation. That's my dream.
Yeah, for sure. So, I can speak for the athlete part. Like, don't you think athletes like we try so hard during games because sometimes it's like it's the biggest moment of the month or the best thing in the week coming up is practice because a lot of times, like I can speak for myself, we deal with medical conditions or stuff that is challenging for us on an everyday basis, but people don't know that, and everyone goes through adversity no matter what, if they have a disability or not. But like Special Olympics, it's the one area where it's like you don't have to worry about that. And do you see that like maybe an athlete goes through something hard on everyday
Yeah,
life, but Special
I
Olympics is
do.
there
I
to cheer
do.
them
And I
up?
think it's a really important point. You know, a lot of life brings us adversity.
Mhm.
You know, right now, we're looking at people, tens of millions of people, are lonely after COVID. A lot of people who are really anxious,
Mhm.
sometimes depressed. We talk about a mental health crisis. I like to call it a crisis of connection. There's a lot of adversity in the world and in life for all of us. And I think Special Olympics can do that for us. It can give us um, a chance at connection, a chance at affirmation. This is not the place you come to be told what's wrong with you. This is not the place you come to be treated for challenges in your life. This is the place you come to be told what's right with you. And that's not just for people with intellectual disabilities. That's for all of us.
Yeah.
And this is the place you come for a break from all the anxiety and fear. And sometimes that break is enough to help people change their lives because they see, we don't have to be afraid of each other, don't have to be so anxious about the future. There's a lot of things to be anxious about, and it's perfectly healthy and normal to have these challenges. I don't mean to say that's not, but I am saying that there's a lot of ways to address them. And people need, we need more mental health services. We need more opportunities for different kinds of treatments, but we also need connection.
Mhm.
And we also need to be a source of support and trust for each other. When someone's anxious or left out or feeling like they're just treating their problems all day long, we need to be a little bit the counterweight, right? We can say, hey, I get it. Life is tough, but come on over here. Let's kick the soccer ball around. No judgment. If you're not that good by your high school standards, it doesn't matter. We're still going to play with you. Come over here. We'll play bocce. It's fun. We're going to enjoy ourselves. No judgment. No cuts. Connection. Affirmation. As Loretta Claiborne has said so many times, it's not about the disability. Whatever your disability is, your disability may be you're lonely. Your disability may be you're anxious. Your disability may be you're afraid at work. Your disability may, who knows all the different things that challenges we each and every one of us does face. But here at the Special Olympics movement, it's a judgment-free zone. No judgment, Just your ability matters. Whatever level you're at, welcome. We got some. We're thrilled to have you.
Yeah. Well, and one last thing before we go. So, um, what again are you? What's the big thing coming up that you're looking forward to? Besides, obviously, all the special events, but something like a big project you're working on, or like what you said at the beginning, just trying to get people to know more about Special Olympics in 5, 10 years. Where do you hope Special Olympic is at that
Well,
time?
I hope at that time everybody in 10 years, I hope that every person graduating from an American high school will say, yeah, I know about Special Olympics unified sports. I watched,
Mhm.
I played, I learned, I cheered. I know. Just like they'll say, I know about band, or they'll say, I know about basketball. They'll say that, yeah, in my school, we grew up, in our school, we had Special Olympics unified and it made a difference in my life. That's what I'd like. I'd like not some, everybody, everyone. Because I think then we get the chance, I'll put it in this language, not just for an inclusion revolution, but for a dignity revolution. I think the biggest challenge facing our country and not just our young people, but our adults too, is ending this scourge of divisiveness and hostility and bullying. Adults
Mhm.
bully each other
Mhm.
because we don't know how to treat each other with dignity, even when we disagree, even when we're different. And that's the lesson I think Special Olympics can teach, even when we're different. And we are different, thank God, beautifully different, every one of us, right? And beautifully different in our backgrounds and in our biology, but also beautifully different in our ideas and in our perspective. Uh, how do we get to the point where when people see themselves as beautifully different, they treat each other with dignity? That's the message I think our movement can teach.
Yeah, for sure. So when you listen, after you listen to this podcast, come join Special Olympics, like Tim and I said, where
There you go.
nobody gets cut.
Nobody
Everyone,
gets cut.
yeah, everyone can play. So thanks again.
Nobody gets cut. Thanks for having me, Wyatt. It's really a pleasure. And I learned something today, as is often the case.
Yeah, thanks again for joining us, Tim, on Braving the Attempt.
My pleasure.